The soft hum of the airport faded into a distant murmur as Maya Brooks made her way through Terminal A, the crisp morning light casting long shadows across the polished tile floors. The sleek, towering windows of the terminal bathed everything in a golden glow, hinting at the promise of a new day. Maya, dressed in her usual understated style, a pair of tailored dark jeans, a cream cashmere sweater, and simple leather loafers, looked like any other traveler eager to reach her destination. Yet, there was something about her presence, a quiet assurance that made people notice her without understanding why. At 45, Maya had long mastered the art of moving through spaces where she wasn't always expected or welcomed. She had spent years navigating boardrooms as the only black woman at the table, her voice steady amid the white noise of corporate meetings, her calm composure revealing nothing of the pressures she faced. Her natural hair, worn in elegant shoulder-length twists, framed a face marked by a life of hard-earned success, a face she wore proudly without makeup, save for a touch of lip gloss. It was the look of someone who had broken barriers and carried the weight of progress on her shoulders. As she approached the first-class lounge, she thought back on the week's meetings, hours spent presenting data, building cases, and pushing for meaningful changes within the airline industry had left her feeling both empowered and exhausted. Her proposals to implement diversity initiatives, programs she knew could transform the industry, had been met with the usual polite skepticism, masked behind corporate jargon and subtle resistance. Maya knew the coded language well enough. Passionate was how they described her, an adjective used to soften assertive when applied to someone who looked like her. It was a description she accepted with a knowing smile, allowing the board members to hide behind their carefully chosen words. She'd spent too long in rooms like these. Entering the lounge, Maya settled into a quiet corner, ordering a green tea to soothe the fatigue lingering from the week's debates. Around her, business travelers tapped away at laptops, sipped lattes, and exchanged knowing glances over the tops of their newspapers. It was a world she knew well, where appearances meant everything, and quiet judgments filled the spaces between greetings and polite conversation. Maya's presence in first class was sometimes met with a brief double-take, a glance at her attire, a second look at her seat, as if measuring whether she belonged in this world of luxury and quiet exclu. The announcement for her flight broke into her thoughts. Gathering her bag, Maya rose, her gaze focused, her stride as steady as ever. She moved with the unspoken grace of someone who knew precisely who she was and the strength it had taken to become that person. Today was just another flight, she thought. Just a chance to unwind, recharge, and let the tensions of the week's negotiations fade into the clouds. As she boarded the plane and found her seat, 2A by the window, she took a deep breath. The familiar cabin, plush, quiet, and dimly lit, was a setting she knew intimately. It was a seat she'd chosen with care, a spot that offered her a small moment of peace and privacy before diving back into the grind. Around her, other passengers settled in, most oblivious to the quiet force of determination seated among them. Maya placed her bag in the overhead compartment, then reached into her leather tote for her Kindle and notebook. The notebook, a simple but elegant cover embossed with her initials, held her thoughts from the week's meetings, ideas scribbled in the quiet pauses between presentations, reflections she'd come to value more than any polished email or typed report. She opened to a page and glanced over her notes, reminders of her mission to create a more inclusive space for people like her, for the countless others who had been told, in so many words and gestures, that they didn't belong. Lost in thought, she was pulled back by a feeling, a subtle shift in the air, a hint of something not quite right. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the flight attendant making her way down the aisle, her gaze fixed on Maya with a practiced smile that, underneath, carried something else, a look Maya recognized all too well. Maya settled into her seat, 2A, feeling the plush leather cushion beneath her and the quiet hum of the first-class cabin. She took a moment to savor the luxury, knowing all too well that she had earned it through years of hard work and grit. Around her, other passengers filled the seats, exchanging polite nods, adjusting their coats, tapping at their phones. A sense of unspoken status hovered in the air, the shared understanding that, in this space, they were not just passengers but patrons of privilege. As Maya adjusted the seat controls, her eyes drifted, casually observing those around her. To her right, across the aisle, an elegant woman adorned with designer jewelry, her perfectly manicured nails resting on a leather handbag, gave Maya a brief, appraising glance before turning away with the faintest purse of her lips. Maya recognized that look, the subtle calculation, the silent judgment, as if she were a puzzle to be solved. She shook it off, turning her attention to her notebook. The neat, Handwritten notes reflected the passion she'd poured into the week's meetings. Each page was filled with ideas and strategies to drive forward her diversity initiatives. Actions that could transform this very airline. It struck her as ironic that she was here, amidst the luxury of first class, contemplating policies to make these spaces more inclusive, more welcoming. The ambient noise, the quiet clink of glasses, the gentle rustle of newspapers, was suddenly interrupted by the low, clipped voice of a man behind her. She glanced over her shoulder to see a silver-haired executive in an impeccable suit, murmuring into his phone about merger opportunities. He oozed confidence and control, the kind of man who never questioned whether he belonged. Maya felt a small pang of annoyance at herself for noticing. She had spent years cultivating her ability to ignore the silent, coded messages in these spaces. Yet, despite her success, despite her title and the weight of her investments, moments like these reminded her that some spaces still made her feel as though she had something to prove. Returning to her notebook, she tried to refocus. But another presence caught her eye, a young black flight attendant, standing near the galley, her gaze flicking nervously in Maya's direction. Their eyes met briefly, and Maya saw something in the young woman's face, a recognition. A silent understanding that spoke louder than words. Maya nodded slightly, a gesture of quiet solidarity, before looking away. Just then, a shadow loomed in the aisle. The same flight attendant, Susan, her blonde hair tied back in a flawless bun and her uniform impeccable, stopped beside Maya's row. Her expression was polished, her smile courteous. But Maya sensed the tension beneath the surface. A kind of skepticism she'd encountered too many times to count. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Susan asked, her tone overly controlled, as if it were essential to maintain a precise distance. Maya raised an eyebrow but kept her face composed. Without a word, she reached into her bag and retrieved the boarding pass, holding it out with the same calm authority she brought into the boardroom. Susan's fingers closed around it, and for a brief moment, their gazes met. A flicker of something unreadable passed across the flight attendant's face. As Susan examined the boarding pass, Maya noted the way she scrutinized it, as though searching for a sign that something was out of place. The moment stretched, each second amplifying the subtle tension that hung between them. Maya fought back the familiar urge to say something sharp, something that would remind this woman that her presence here was not up for debate. After a few uncomfortable beats, Susan looked up, her smile taut. "I think there may have been a mistake," she said, her voice low but carrying enough volume to be overheard by those around them. "Sometimes, our system accidentally assigns incorrect seats. I'll be happy to find a more suitable one for you in the economy cabin." Maya's chest tightened, but her expression remained calm, her gaze unyielding as she took back her boarding pass. "No mistake," she replied evenly, her voice steady, carrying the quiet authority that only years of breaking through barriers could bring. "This is my seat. I selected it specifically." A hint of uncertainty flashed in Susan's eyes, but she hesitated only a moment. "I'll just confirm with our ticketing team to avoid any confusion," she said, maintaining that fixed smile. She stepped back, her tone implying she was doing Maya a favor, a concession of some kind. As Susan turned to leave, Maya noticed the lingering stares of nearby passengers. Some quickly looked away, pretending to be absorbed in their reading or phones. Others continued watching, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and perhaps even pity. A woman a few rows ahead adjusted her handbag conspicuously, as though she feared something unexpected might happen here. Maya exhaled slowly, turning her attention back to her notebook. This was not the first time she'd felt her presence questioned, her belonging challenged. But today, the weight of it settled differently. Today, the confrontation felt like an echo of all the moments she had fought for change within this airline. Of all the initiatives and policies designed to ensure people like her felt welcome in places like this. With a calm yet unshakable resolve, Maya returned her gaze to the page, letting the moment wash over her without pulling her down. She had a role to play, not just as a passenger but as someone determined to dismantle the very assumptions that seemed to cloud every corner of this space. As she resumed her notes, a thought took shape, as crisp and bright as the sunlight streaming through the window beside her. If there was ever a time to show why change mattered, this was it. Maya's fingers traced the edges of her notebook as she pretended to focus, her eyes lingering on the pages of carefully outlined initiatives. But her mind was on the scene that had just unfolded. The calculated professionalism masking skepticism in the flight attendant's tone. The sensation was all too familiar. That subtle signal meant to tell people like her, that they were in the wrong place. Lost in thought, she hardly noticed the quiet shuffle of footsteps approaching. She looked up to see the flight attendant, Susan, returning, accompanied by a man in a crisp dark suit who carried an air of importance. He was tall, clean-shaven, with an authoritative expression carefully arranged to project calm and control. His name badge read David Mitchell, Customer Service Supervisor. David stopped by Maya's seat, casting a quick glance at her and then at the nearby passengers whose eyes darted between the three of them. The cabin had quieted, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation dying down to a hush, as if every passenger had sensed the mounting tension. "Ma'am, it seems there's been a slight mix-up with your seating assignment," David said, his voice low but unmistakably firm, as though a mistake in first class was a disruption he'd handle with utmost efficiency. Maya looked up at him with an unflinching gaze, a practiced, polite smile just barely curving her lips. "I'm certain there's no mistake," she replied, her voice steady, unwavering. "I chose this seat, months ago." David held her gaze for a moment. His own smile stretched thin as he nodded slowly. He glanced down at the boarding pass she held in her hand. It was a pause filled with unspoken tension, with silent calculations as his expression shifted ever so slightly, struggling to reconcile what he saw with whatever assumptions had already formed in his mind. "Perhaps we could find a more suitable arrangement for you in economy," he said, careful to keep his tone neutral, though the implication behind the words was clear to anyone who bothered to listen. Maya felt the tightening in her shoulders, the rising wave of indignation she had learned to contain over decades of navigating spaces just like this. She let a beat pass, then met his eyes, unyielding. "I assure you, I am fully entitled to this seat," she said, the weight of her words falling like stones in the otherwise silent cabin. "I selected it specifically." A flicker of uncertainty passed over David's face, but it was quickly masked as he nodded and gestured to Susan, who took a step back, her earlier confidence fading slightly under the unrelenting steadiness in Maya's voice. Other passengers, once feigning disinterest, were now openly watching. A tech entrepreneur a few rows ahead had paused mid-call, while a silver-haired businessman sat stiffly in his seat, his brows knit in curiosity. Maya caught the eye of the young black flight attendant, Jasmine, peering from the galley with cautious interest. Their eyes met briefly, and in that shared glance, Maya saw a recognition, an understanding of what was happening here, a shared burden that they both knew all too well. David cleared his throat, pulling her attention back to him. "Of course, Ms. Brooks," he said. And for the first time, Maya noticed his hesitancy, a flash of doubt crossing his carefully composed expression. "If you'll give me a moment to check with our ticketing team, I'm sure we can resolve this quickly." As he turned to confer with Susan, Maya felt the weight of each glance directed her way. The woman across the aisle, draped in designer labels, looked from Maya to David with something close to pity. The businessman nearby was watching intently, perhaps hoping for entertainment to break up the monotony of his flight. Just then, she noticed the man beside David leaning in, murmuring something quietly in his ear. David straightened, his gaze sharpening, his earlier air of authority now tinged with something that looked suspiciously like nerves. His eyes drifted to the boarding pass once more, but this time with a different kind of scrutiny, as though her words had triggered a realization, as though he was starting to see something he had overlooked. Maya allowed herself a small, calm breath, her pulse steady. This was a moment she had encountered before, a test of resilience she had long mastered. But today, with the eyes of the cabin upon her and the reality of the week's discussions on inclusivity and respect playing in her mind, she felt something else, a determination to see this interaction through to its full impact. Slowly, she reached into her leather messenger bag, extracting a business card from the sleek holder. She held it out, allowing it to catch the cabin's muted light, and met David's eyes with quiet force. "David," she said, her voice low but carrying a weight that left no room for misunderstanding. "I'm Maya Brooks." She paused, watching his expression shift from confusion to something more akin to shock as he connected the name with the business card in his hand. "You'll find my name in the investor database," she continued, her tone never wavering. "And you'll also find that I've been working to improve experiences like this for quite some time." The reaction was immediate. David's face paled as he glanced from her to Susan, then back down at the card. The passengers who had been watching with barely disguised interest now exchanged uneasy glances, as if sensing that what they had mistaken for a seating dispute was, in fact, something far more significant. Susan took a step back, her earlier confidence now fully dissolved as she watched David's reaction, her fingers nervously adjusting her name tag. The woman across the aisle looked away, her interest suddenly transferred to her magazine. The businessman, who had been following with interest, now shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Maya met Jasmine's gaze once more, catching the faintest hint of a smile. It was a smile of silent solidarity. A small gesture that spoke to the significance of this moment, not just for Maya, but for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. David looked up at her, his composure slipping, revealing a flicker of genuine contrition. "Ms. Brooks," he began, his voice subdued, stripped of the authority he'd wielded moments before. I apologize for the misunderstanding." Maya gave a small nod, allowing the silence to fill the space, letting each passenger feel the weight of the moment. The silence was heavy with recognition, with the quiet dawning of awareness in each face that turned toward her. Each gaze now softened with a touch of something close to respect. The cabin, once filled with assumptions and judgments, had shifted, and Maya, calm and composed, held her seat with a dignity that spoke louder than any words ever could. The silence in the first-class cabin was thick, charged with an unspoken tension that seemed to hang in the air long after Maya's words had landed. David's hand, still clutching her business card, trembled slightly as he processed what had just unfolded. He was no longer the calm, authoritative figure who had approached with quiet confidence. His expression now carried the weight of realization, each line etched with embarrassment. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some turning away with sudden interest in their phones and magazines, others openly watching the scene. Maya could sense their growing awareness that this wasn't merely a seating issue, it was something deeper. Something that touched on all those invisible assumptions lurking beneath the surface of polite society. David cleared his throat, a quiet gesture that seemed to amplify the silence even more. His gaze flicked from the card in his hand to Maya, to the young flight attendant, Jasmine, who stood by the galley, watching with an expression that mingled hope and curiosity. Jasmine's presence, barely acknowledged by most, took on new significance now. Her posture straighter, her gaze unwavering as if she, too, was waiting to see how this would play out. "Ms. Brooks," David began, his voice lacking the authority it had carried just moments before. "I am so deeply sorry for the inconvenience. I assure you, this was a simple misunderstanding." But Maya held up a hand, a calm but decisive gesture that silenced him. "David, I appreciate the apology," she said, her tone carrying the weight of years spent in boardrooms, dismantling biases and navigating the very structures that had brought them to this moment. "But this isn't just about a misunderstanding. It's about the assumptions that led to it in the first place." Around them, the other passengers seemed to hold their breath, as though any sound might shatter the delicate tension. Even the silver-haired businessman who had once regarded her with curiosity now sat silently, his eyes fixed on a spot in front of him, as though grappling with his own unspoken assumptions. David's face flushed as he nodded, his gaze darting to the floor, then to Susan, who stood beside him, her earlier confidence now replaced by a visible discomfort. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, her smile faltering under the pressure of Maya's gaze. Maya could see it, the dawning realization in Susan's eyes, the understanding that her casual assumptions had unraveled into something far more significant than a simple seating dispute. Maya leaned forward slightly, her voice low yet carrying an undeniable strength. "I didn't become an investor in this airline just for the dividends," she continued, her words intentional, each one dropping like a stone into the stillness of the cabin. "I invested because I believe that this airline, and others, have a responsibility to create spaces that are truly inclusive, where all passengers are treated with the dignity they deserve, regardless of who they are or where they're seated." David shifted, visibly uncomfortable under her steady gaze. But Maya pressed on. "And yet, here I am, experiencing firsthand exactly what I've been advocating to change." She could feel the eyes of the cabin on her. But more importantly, she could feel Jasmine's steady, watchful gaze from the galley, as if willing her to keep going, to say what needed to be said. Susan took a small step forward, her voice tentative. "Ms. Brooks, I apologize for my assumption. I didn't mean to offend you. I should have verified your status more thoroughly." Maya regarded her for a long moment, seeing the sincerity in Susan's eyes. But she also saw the weight of habit, the automatic assumptions that had prompted her to question Maya's presence in first class, to overlook her entitlement to this space because of how she looked. Maya knew all too well that it wasn't malice that drove these actions, it was something subtler, more ingrained, an unconscious bias woven into the very fabric of their society. With a calm, measured nod, Maya replied, "Thank you, Susan. I appreciate your honesty." She paused, her gaze shifting between Susan and David, who still stood at her side, his face pale, his hand clutching the business card as if it were a lifeline. But what I want to know, she continued, her voice soft but unyielding, is how we can ensure that this doesn't happen again. Not just to me, but to anyone who has ever felt out of place in a space where they belonged. David's expression shifted. A mix of relief and respect settling over him as he realized that Maya's intent wasn't to seek retribution but to create change. He glanced over at Jasmine, who was still watching with a look of quiet encouragement. With a newfound resolve, David nodded, a spark of genuine engagement entering his eyes. Ms. Brooks, you're absolutely right. I believe there's much we can learn from this. Maya took a breath, sensing that her words had reached them, that they'd cut through the defenses and made an impact. And as the cabin seemed to exhale, as the tension eased, she looked back at Jasmine and offered her a small, reassuring smile. Jasmine's face brightened, the pride in her expression unmistakable, a silent acknowledgement that Maya's words had resonated not only with those in power but also with those who felt they had none. Just then, the sound of engines revving outside the window signaled that departure was near. The morning sunlight spilled across the cabin, casting soft rays over the silent faces of her fellow passengers. Over David and Susan, who were still absorbing the implications of this encounter. And as Maya settled back into her seat, the faint hum of conversation resumed. But it carried a different tone now, a tone of reflection, of quiet introspection, as if each person in that cabin was rethinking, recalculating, processing their own unspoken assumptions. Maya picked up her notebook again, her thoughts settling, a sense of calm washing over her. She knew that this moment, this simple confrontation, would not change everything overnight. But it was a beginning, a crack in the armor of silent prejudice. A small yet powerful reminder that progress came in waves. In conversations. In quiet but meaningful exchanges. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Maya looked out the window, watching the ground fade away beneath them. A view that stretched to the horizon. She felt a quiet satisfaction. A certainty that she had done more than defend her right to a seat. She had created a ripple, however small, that she hoped would resonate beyond this single flight. A ripple that might one day reach every corner of the airline, reshaping it into a place where everyone, no matter their background, felt that they belonged. And as the plane ascended, cutting through the bright morning sky, Maya sat back, her thoughts already on the changes to come, the work yet to be done, and the many flights ahead. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling, perhaps for the first time in a long while, that she was exactly where she needed to be. The plane leveled out, the familiar ascent giving way to the serene calm of cruising altitude. As the flight attendants began serving refreshments, the atmosphere in the cabin slowly shifted back to its usual rhythm. But for Maya, everything had changed. Her encounter with David and Susan had left an indelible mark. A crack in the carefully constructed facade of first-class privilege that would ripple far beyond this single flight. Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself as she glanced at her fellow passengers. Most were engrossed in their phones or magazines, but a few exchanged whispered conversations, their expressions reflecting a mix of curiosity and contemplation. She wondered if they were processing what had just transpired. If they, too, felt the weight of the moment. For some, it might have been merely an inconvenience. But for Maya, it was a pivotal point, a chance to ignite a change that had long been overdue. As the flight attendant, Jasmine, made her way down the aisle, Maya caught her eye. A silent understanding passed between them. A shared acknowledgement of the power dynamics that had just shifted. Jasmine paused at Maya's side, her demeanor more relaxed now, as if the tension from earlier had finally dissipated. "Thank you for standing up like that," Jasmine said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with sincerity. "I've seen so many people get treated like they don't belong. And it's disheartening. You don't know how much it means to have someone speak out." Maya smiled, touched by Jasmine's words. "We all deserve to be treated with respect. No matter where we sit," she replied, her tone warm but firm. "It's about time we challenge these assumptions." Jasmine nodded, her expression shifting from admiration to determination. "I've wanted to make a difference, too. But it's hard when you're just a flight attendant. What can I do?" Maya paused, considering the young woman's question. "You already are. Just by being here and observing," she said. "But you can also be an advocate for change within the airline. Speak up when you see bias. Share your experiences. Every small action counts." Their conversation was interrupted by David, who approached with a newfound seriousness etched on his face. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice steady but respectful, "I've spoken with our operations team, and we would like to make this right. I'd like to invite you to participate in a meeting next week with our senior management team to discuss diversity training and customer service initiatives. Maya felt a surge of hope at his words. This was more than she had anticipated. A tangible opportunity to influence real change within the organization. I would be happy to, she replied, her heart racing with excitement and determination. It's crucial that we address these issues head-on. David nodded, relief washing over his features. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Your insights could be invaluable in shaping our approach moving forward. He hesitated, then added, I want to ensure this airline reflects the values we claim to uphold. As David turned to leave, Maya caught a glimpse of the other passengers again, their eyes flicking toward her and then back to their conversations. She sensed a shift among them, an awakening to the realities of the systemic issues they often overlooked. The subtle judgments, the assumptions about who belonged in first class. She hoped her encounter would leave a lasting impression on them. After the refreshments were served and the initial buzz of conversation returned, Maya opened her notebook once more, her mind swirling with ideas and strategies. This was a moment she had waited for, a chance to push for change from within, to advocate for those who felt invisible in spaces meant for comfort and luxury. She scribbled down notes about the topics she wanted to address, the anecdotes she could share to illustrate the importance of empathy and understanding in customer service. But beneath her excitement lay a twinge of uncertainty. How far could she really push? Would her colleagues in the corporate boardroom listen? Or would they dismiss her as too aggressive, too passionate, as they had before? She knew that the path to change was fraught with challenges, but she was ready to confront them. As the flight progressed, Maya found herself engrossed in her thoughts, only occasionally looking up to catch snippets of conversation around her. The atmosphere had softened, the passengers now appearing more relaxed, less prone to judgment. Perhaps the earlier confrontation had opened their eyes. Just a little. Jasmine returned to collect empty glasses, her presence a comforting reminder of the connection they had forged. I'll be rooting for you, Ms. Brooks, she said with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. We need more people like you willing to speak up. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at Jasmine's words. Thank you. And remember, you have a voice too. Use it, she encouraged. Change starts with conversations like ours. With a nod, Jasmine moved down the aisle, and Maya returned her focus to her notebook. She had work to do, a mission to undertake, and a vision to share. The flight may have been just one of many in her career, but it felt like a turning point, a pivotal moment that could set the stage for deeper conversations and meaningful reforms. As the plane cruised through the clouds, the horizon stretching wide and bright before her, Maya felt a sense of purpose building within. This was her moment to not only challenge the status quo but to change it. She would take her experiences, her voice, and her determination and ensure that this journey became one of transformation, not just for herself, but for everyone who flew this airline, for everyone who sought a seat at the table. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow across the cabin, Maya smiled to herself, the excitement for what lay ahead igniting a fire within her. This was just the beginning. As the flight progressed, Maya could feel a sense of anticipation building in the cabin. Conversations flowed more freely now, passengers seeming more engaged, and the atmosphere was charged with an unspoken understanding that something significant had transpired. Maya's heart raced, a mix of hope and trepidation swirling within her as she prepared for what lay ahead. When the plane finally reached cruising altitude, she pressed the call button, summoning both David and Susan to her side. Maya knew this was an opportunity to shift the conversation from the discomfort of the earlier encounter to something productive, something that could lead to real change within the airline. David approached first, his demeanor more open, his earlier stiffness replaced by a willingness to listen. Ms. Brooks, he began, his tone sincere. Thank you for your patience and for agreeing to have this conversation. I think it's essential that we use this moment to discuss how we can improve our practices and ensure that our team is better prepared. Maya smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude that her experience was being recognized as a catalyst for action. I appreciate that, David. It's crucial we turn this incident into a learning opportunity, not just for you and Susan but for everyone in the airline. The biases that led to this situation are deeply. Susan stood quietly beside David, her eyes attentive, a hint of vulnerability in her posture. Maya could see the tension in her shoulders as she prepared to engage in a conversation that would challenge her own. I'd like to share some insights from my perspective, Maya continued, her voice steady and inviting. When I first entered the cabin and took my seat, the assumptions made about me were not just about my appearance, they were about the history of this industry and how it has treated individuals who look like me. I've encountered situations like this countless times. And each. David nodded. The gravity of her words settling in the air between them. That's an important point. And I recognize that it's something we need to address at every level of our operations, he replied. His tone thoughtful. What can we do to make sure that our staff is AWA? Maya took a breath, gathering her thoughts. First, comprehensive training is essential. We need to create programs that educate employees about unconscious bias. Not just in theory but through real-world scenarios that they can relate to. Role-playing exercises can help staff understand the implications of their assumptions and how they can affect customers. Susan shifted slightly, her expression contemplative. That's exactly it. Maya encouraged. Policies can only go so far. We need to cultivate empathy and understanding within the team. Perhaps we can implement regular workshops where staff can share experiences and learn from one another. This could foster a culture of openness and accountability, making it clear that we're all responsible for. David jotted down notes, his attention focused, and Maya could see the gears turning in his mind as he processed her suggestions. I love that idea, he said. It's actionable, and it encourages engagement from all levels. But how do we ensure that these trainings are taken seriously? We've implemented programs in the past that have fallen flat because. Maya smiled, feeling the excitement of the conversation flow through her. That's where leadership comes in. Senior management needs to be involved in these sessions, showing that they're committed to change. When leaders model the behavior they want to see, it sets the tone for. Susan nodded in agreement, her expression brightening with the possibilities unfolding before them. I think I understand now. It's not just about training, it's about changing the N. Maya felt the momentum building, a collective energy coursing through the conversation. Exactly. And we should also consider gathering feedback from passengers after their flights. An anonymous survey could help us understand their experiences better and allow us to make informed changes. It's about creating a dialogue, not just one-sided communication. David glanced at Susan, then back at Maya, his expression shifting to one of admiration. You've put a lot of thought into this, haven't you? I have, Maya admitted, her voice filled with conviction. Because I believe in this airline's potential. I believe it can be a leader in the industry, setting standards not just for customer service but for how we treat one another as individuals. As the conversation continued, they explored various topics, from enhancing customer service training to integrating diversity metrics into performance reviews. Each idea sparked new discussions, and Maya felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. This wasn't just a conversation about policies, it was a chance to reshape the culture of the airline, to ensure that no one would ever have to face the same assumptions and biases she had encountered. As the cabin lights dimmed for the in-flight movie, Maya glanced around at the other passengers, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of screens. She felt a connection to them, to the collective journey they were on, both in the air and in society. The moment was significant, a ripple in the fabric of what it meant to belong. Thank you for being willing to have this conversation, Maya said, turning back to David and Susan, her eyes bright with determination. I'm looking forward to seeing how we can work together to bring these changes to life. It's going to take time and effort, but I believe we can make a real difference. David nodded, a newfound sense of purpose evident in his posture. I'm committed to making this happen. We'll schedule a meeting with our executive team to discuss your proposals. This will not be a missed opportunity. As they wrapped up the conversation, Maya felt a surge of hope. It was a turning point not just for her but for everyone who had ever felt marginalized within the very structures they sought to navigate. This was just the beginning, a glimpse of the transformative journey ahead. As the plane sailed smoothly through the night sky, Maya leaned back in her seat, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but with each conversation, with each small step, they were carving a new path, one that would ultimately lead to a more inclusive, respectful environment for all. And as the stars twinkled outside her window, she felt a deep sense of purpose guiding her forward, ready to face whatever came next. The flight glided smoothly through the night sky, the hum of the engines providing a comforting backdrop to Maya's thoughts. As she reflected on the discussions she had just had with David and Susan, a sense of exhilaration washed over her. This was not just a conversation, it was the start of something much larger. The anticipation of change filled the cabin, electrifying the air around her. The in-flight movie flickered on screens, casting soft light across the faces of the passengers. But Maya's mind was elsewhere. She pulled out her notebook, the pages now filled with ideas and sketches from their conversation. Each note felt like a stepping stone toward a more inclusive future. A roadmap that could guide them through the labyrinth of bias and prejudice. Suddenly, a gentle tap on her shoulder interrupted her thoughts. It was Jasmine. Her eyes bright with excitement. "Ms. Brooks," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. "I couldn't help but overhear some of your conversation with David and Susan. I think what you're doing is incredible." Maya smiled, encouraged by Jasmine's enthusiasm. "Thank you, Jasmine. It's important that we all speak up. And I'm glad you see the potential for change, too. I really want to help," Jasmine said earnestly, her voice low but filled with passion. "Is there anything I can do to support the initiatives you're proposing? I feel like I could contribute, but I'm not sure how." Maya's heart swelled at the young flight attendant's eagerness. "Your role is vital," she replied. "You are on the front lines, interacting with passengers daily. Your insights can guide us on what needs to change. Once we start the new training programs, having staff like you involved will be crucial to making them effective." Jasmine's expression lit up with hope. "I'd love to be part of the training sessions. I want to share my experiences and help my colleagues understand the impact of their words and actions." Maya nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We can make that happen. If I can get David and the executive team on board, we can create a framework for these workshops that includes real-life scenarios from the ground staff. Your experiences will lend authenticity to the training." As they talked, a sense of camaraderie blossomed between them. Maya felt inspired, knowing that her efforts were resonating beyond just herself. Together, they could build a foundation for change that would ripple through the airline and reach every employee, every passenger. The rest of the flight continued without incident, the cabin filled with a collective sense of calm. As passengers settled into their movies or conversations, Maya took a moment to gaze out the window at the sea of stars stretching endlessly across the sky. Each star seemed to glimmer with potential, mirroring the hope she felt for the changes ahead. When the flight attendants made their rounds to collect dinner trays, David approached Maya's seat again, this time with a more relaxed demeanor. "I've been thinking about what we discussed," he said, his tone thoughtful. "I'd like to set up a follow-up meeting as soon as we land to start mapping out an action plan. I believe this is just the beginning of an essential transformation for our airline." Maya's heart raced at his words. "That sounds great, David. The sooner we start, the better. I have a few ideas for how we can implement the training and gather feedback from both staff and passengers to ensure its effectiveness." "Perfect," he said, his enthusiasm infectious. "Let's get a diverse group involved in the planning process, including frontline staff and management. Their insights will be invaluable." Maya nodded, the vision of a truly inclusive initiative starting to take shape in her mind. "I agree. We should create a task force that includes representatives from various departments to ensure that all voices are heard." The conversation flowed naturally, filled with excitement and determination. They discussed timelines, potential challenges, and how to engage the entire staff in the upcoming changes. Each idea felt like a thread weaving a larger tapestry of change, an intricate design that would ultimately transform the culture of the airline. As the plane began its descent, Maya felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had turned a moment of confrontation into an opportunity for growth, not just for herself but for everyone involved. The journey she had embarked on was about to take flight, and she was ready to lead the charge. When the plane touched down smoothly at the airport, the cabin erupted in applause, a collective sigh of relief echoing through the aisles. Maya joined in, her heart swelling with pride, not just for the successful flight but for the work that lay ahead. As they disembarked, she turned to Jasmine. "Thank you for your support today. It means a lot to me and to the future of our airline." Jasmine beamed, her excitement palpable. "I can't wait to get started. Let's make this change happen together." Maya stepped off the plane and into the bustling terminal, a world alive with possibility. She was no longer just an investor, she was an agent of change, a voice for those who felt unheard. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was ready for the challenges that awaited. With each step she took, she felt more empowered, more resolute. The journey toward inclusivity and respect had just begun, and she was determined to see it through, ensuring that the skies, and the world, became a place where everyone belonged. The conference room at the airline's headquarters buzzed with anticipation. Maya stood at the head of the table, flanked by David and Jasmine, who had both taken on crucial roles in the upcoming initiatives. Sunlight poured through the large windows, illuminating the polished wood of the table and casting a warm glow over the gathered executives and staff. This was a pivotal moment, one that could redefine the culture of the airline and create a ripple effect throughout the industry. As the attendees settled into their chairs, Maya felt a rush of determination. She glanced around the room, noting the mix of faces, some familiar, others new, each carrying their own expectations and experiences. Today, they would collectively shape the future of the airline. And she was ready to lead the charge. "Thank you all for being here," Maya began, her voice steady and confident. "Today marks the start of a significant transformation for our airline. We're not just discussing diversity and inclusion, we're committing to making it a fundamental part of our identity." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and Maya smiled, encouraged by their engagement. She pulled out her notes and outlined the key points they had discussed during previous meetings: the need for comprehensive training, the establishment of a task force, and the integration of feedback mechanisms to ensure the initiatives were effective and relevant. David leaned forward, adding, "We want this to be a collaborative effort. Every department must be involved. And we need representatives from all levels of our organization. That includes frontline staff, management, and, most importantly, the voices of our customers." Maya nodded in agreement. "We've seen firsthand the impact that biases can have on both our employees and our passengers. Our goal is to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their background." As she spoke, she could see the wheels turning in the minds of those around her. Some looked thoughtful, others eager to contribute. Maya felt a surge of hope. This was the opportunity she had long envisioned. A chance to address the systemic issues that had persisted for far too long. "Jasmine and I have been working on the framework for the training program," David continued. "We've developed a series of workshops designed to challenge unconscious biases and foster empathy among our staff. We'll also be incorporating role-playing exercises that reflect real-life scenarios." Maya turned to Jasmine, who was radiating enthusiasm. "We want our colleagues to understand that these aren't just theoretical concepts, they are lived experiences. By sharing our stories, we can help them see the real impact of their actions." One of the executives, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a skeptical expression, raised his hand. "How do you plan to ensure that these changes are lasting? We've implemented training programs in the past that quickly faded into routine." Maya welcomed the challenge, ready to address the concern head-on. "That's an important question. This initiative isn't a one-time training session, it's an ongoing commitment. We need to establish accountability at every level. Regular check-ins, feedback sessions, and evaluations will ensure that we're continually improving and adapting." The conversation flowed freely, ideas bouncing around the room like a game of ping-pong. They discussed creating a feedback loop that would allow staff and passengers to voice their experiences, ensuring that no one felt unheard. They considered launching an internal campaign to promote the new initiatives, complete with posters and videos featuring staff sharing their commitment to inclusivity. As the meeting progressed, Maya felt the energy shift, a palpable sense of purpose radiating from the group. The more they discussed, the more passionate everyone became about the potential for change. It was no longer just her vision, it was a collective dream, a shared responsibility. After several hours of discussion, the meeting began to wind down. Maya felt a sense of satisfaction as she looked around the room at her colleagues, each one contributing their own ideas and perspectives. It was a diverse group, a reflection of the community they aimed to serve. "Before we wrap up," Maya said, raising her hand to gain attention, "I'd like to propose something a little different. I believe we should establish a community outreach program, where we engage with the neighborhoods and passengers we serve. We can host forums to listen to their experiences and gather feedback on how we can improve." The room buzzed with excitement at this idea, and Maya could see that it resonated with many. David nodded enthusiastically, his eyes gleaming with possibility. "That's a fantastic idea, Maya. It will help us not only understand our passengers better but also build trust and relationships in our communities." As the meeting concluded, Maya felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had laid the groundwork for a future that embraced diversity, inclusion, and empathy, principles that had often felt out of reach. It was a crucial step in ensuring that the airline didn't just reflect its commitment on paper but lived it every day through its actions. As they all stood to leave, several colleagues approached Maya, expressing their support and enthusiasm. "Thank you for spearheading this," one of the executives said. "I'm excited to see where this goes." Walking out of the conference room, Maya felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This was just the beginning, but she could already envision the impact their efforts would have. She could see the ripple effect extending beyond the airline, touching lives, reshaping experiences, and challenging biases. As she made her way back to her office, Maya's mind raced with ideas and possibilities. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them head-on. With the support of her colleagues and the commitment they had made today, she felt emboldened to continue the fight for change. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city as she looked out of her office window. The horizon stretched before her, vast and open, filled with potential. She was filled with a sense of hope and determination, ready to take on whatever came next. The journey toward inclusivity was long, but it was a journey she was proud to be on. And with every step, she would continue to push for a world where everyone belonged. Weeks had passed since the pivotal meeting, and the atmosphere at the airline's headquarters buzzed with newfound energy. Maya Brooks moved through the halls with a sense of purpose, a palpable excitement in the air as the initiatives she had fought for began to take shape. Posters emblazoned with messages of inclusivity and respect adorned the walls, a daily reminder of their commitment to change. In the conference room, Maya prepared for the first official training session, a crucial step in rolling out their new program designed to challenge unconscious biases and foster a culture of empathy. The room was filled with a diverse group of employees, all eager to participate in what promised to be an enlightening experience. David and Jasmine stood beside her, their expressions mirroring the anticipation that coursed through her veins. "Thank you all for joining us today," Maya began, her voice steady and confident. "We're here not just to learn but to engage in open conversations about our experiences and how we can better serve each other and our passengers." The group nodded, their attention fully on her. As she scanned the room, she noted the mix of staff, flight attendants, ground crew, customer service representatives, and management. This was the diversity they had aimed for, a representation of the community they served. As the session commenced, Maya led discussions on recognizing biases, how they form, how they manifest, and most importantly, how to confront them. They broke into small groups, discussing scenarios that highlighted the very issues they were trying to address. Maya moved among the groups, listening to their conversations, offering insights and encouragement. "Let's remember that our passengers are more than just faces in the seats," Maya urged. "Each one has a story, a background, and expectations. How can we ensure they feel valued and respected during their journey with us?" The room erupted into dialogue, employees sharing anecdotes about their interactions with passengers, moments when they had felt the weight of bias, and instances when they had witnessed discrimination. It was a raw, honest exchange that filled the room with a sense of solidarity. At one point, a veteran flight attendant named Carla spoke up. "I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I've seen how biases can seep into our service. It's not always intentional, but it's there. I want to do better, and I believe we can as a team." Maya's heart swelled with pride at Carla's vulnerability. "That's the spirit we need," she replied. "Acknowledging our biases is the first step toward change. Together, we can create a culture where every employee feels empowered to challenge those biases, not just in themselves but in each other." As the training session continued, it became clear that the employees were invested in the process. Laughter and spirited debate filled the room, the air thick with the electricity of transformation. Maya could feel the momentum building, the seeds of change taking root in the hearts and minds of her colleagues. After several hours of discussions, role-playing, and shared stories, Maya brought the group back together for a final reflection. "We're not just implementing a training program, we're committing to a cultural shift. This is about more than compliance, it's about compassion and understanding." A young customer service representative raised her hand, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "I want to help spread this message beyond just our team. Can we organize outreach events in our communities? It would be amazing to engage with the people we serve directly." Maya beamed at the suggestion, a sense of pride swelling within her. "Absolutely. Community engagement is essential. We want to ensure that our initiatives resonate beyond our walls. Together, we can foster relationships with the communities we serve and invite their voices into our journey of change." As the session came to a close, Maya felt a wave of accomplishment wash over her. They had begun to cultivate an environment where empathy reigned and where every individual felt empowered to share their experiences. This was not just a program, it was the beginning of a movement. After the training, Maya, David, and Jasmine gathered in the hallway, excitement evident on their faces. "That was incredible," David said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I can't believe how engaged everyone was. I think we really struck a chord today." Maya nodded, her heart full. "This is just the beginning. We need to keep the momentum going. Let's establish regular follow-up sessions to ensure we continue this dialogue and address any concerns that arise." Jasmine smiled, her eyes sparkling with determination. "And I'll help organize community events. I have ideas for forums where we can invite passengers to share their experiences with us." As they discussed next steps, Maya felt the weight of their collective vision lifting her spirits. They were no longer merely a group of employees, they were a team committed to meaningful change. Over the following weeks, the ripple effects of their efforts became evident. News of the airline's commitment to inclusivity spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with stories from passengers praising the airline's new initiatives. Customers began to share their experiences, highlighting how the changes were making a difference in how they felt treated during their travels. Maya watched with pride as the airline received accolades from various organizations for its dedication to diversity and inclusion. It was validating, a testament to the work they had poured their hearts into. The transformation was not just within the company, it resonated throughout the industry, prompting other airlines to re-evaluate their practices. As Maya stood in her office one evening, gazing out at the vibrant city skyline, she felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. They had taken a stand against bias and prejudice, and the impact of their commitment would continue to ripple outwards, touching lives far beyond the airline's reach. But Maya knew their journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, biases to confront, and voices that needed to be amplified. With every step, she was committed to pushing forward, ensuring that their mission of inclusivity remained at the forefront of everything they did. In that moment, as the sun set behind the horizon, Maya felt a deep sense of purpose solidifying within her. She was ready for whatever lay ahead, determined to continue the fight for change, ensuring that the skies remained open to all. The airline had been transformed, but the journey for true equality had only just begun. Months had passed since Maya Brooks had stood in the conference room, igniting the spark that would change the course of the airline. Now, as she stepped into the same room, a sense of nostalgia washed over her. The walls adorned with colorful posters celebrating diversity and inclusion felt like a testament to the journey they had undertaken together. Today was the day of the annual company meeting, and Maya stood before her colleagues with a sense of pride swelling in her chest. The room was filled with familiar faces. Some were the same employees who had participated in the initial training sessions, while others were newly hired, eager to contribute to the airline's evolving culture. "Thank you all for being here today," Maya began, her voice steady and warm. "This meeting is not just about reflecting on our achievements but also about looking ahead to what more we can do together. Our commitment to inclusion and respect has become the cornerstone of our airline, and it's time we celebrate that progress." A ripple of applause spread through the room, and Maya felt a rush of gratitude. The atmosphere was charged with excitement, a shared understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves. Maya moved to the center of the room, her notes in hand, but her heart was full of stories she wanted to share. "I'd like to start by highlighting some of the incredible changes we've implemented since we began this journey. Thanks to your dedication and passion, we've established a comprehensive diversity training program that has engaged nearly every employee." She paused, scanning the faces in the room, each one filled with anticipation. "We've seen significant improvements in our customer satisfaction ratings, particularly among minority passengers, which speaks volumes about the impact of our collective efforts. But what's even more important is the culture we've fostered, a culture where everyone feels seen, valued, and heard." More applause erupted, and Maya felt a smile spread across her face. "Today, I want to acknowledge a few individuals who have gone above and beyond in making these changes a reality. I'd like to invite Jasmine to share her insights on our community outreach program, which has been a cornerstone of our commitment to inclusivity." Jasmine, who had been sitting eagerly at the front, stood up with a blend of nervousness and excitement. "Thank you, Maya," she said, her voice resonating with enthusiasm. "When we started the outreach program, my goal was to create real connections with the communities we serve. We've hosted forums that invite feedback from passengers and residents, and I'm thrilled to say that these interactions have transformed how we approach customer service." As Jasmine spoke, Maya watched the audience lean in, captivated by her passion. "Through these forums, we've heard countless stories that have not only informed our policies but also inspired us to be better. We're no longer just a business, we're a part of a community. We've learned to listen, and that has made all the difference." Maya felt a swell of pride at how far they had come. She knew Jasmine's contributions were vital in bridging the gap between the airline and its passengers. The connection they had built was evident, and it would serve as a model for others in the industry. After Jasmine concluded her speech, Maya took the floor again, her heart racing with excitement. "I'd also like to introduce David, who has played an instrumental role in reshaping our training programs and ensuring that our commitment to diversity is woven into the fabric of our airline." David stood, a hint of humility in his posture. Thank you, Maya. Working alongside all of you has been incredibly rewarding. It's important to recognize that the real work begins now. Our commitment to inclusivity must be ongoing. And it requires all of us to remain vigilant and engaged. The room filled with applause once more. And Maya felt the energy radiating around her. Each clapping hand was a pledge to uphold the values they had established together. As the meeting continued, employees shared their experiences, insights, and the challenges they had faced. Each story was a reminder of the journey they had taken, the obstacles they had overcome, and the victories they had celebrated. Maya was moved by the collective commitment to fostering a culture of respect and belonging, one that would carry them into the future. As the session drew to a close, Maya looked out at her colleagues, their faces illuminated with hope and determination. Today marks a significant milestone for our airline, she said, her voice filled with emotion. But this is just the beginning. We must continue to hold each other accountable, to strive for excellence in our service, and to ensure that every passenger feels welcomed on board. Together, we can shape an industry that truly reflects the diversity of our world. The room erupted in applause once again, and Maya's heart swelled with gratitude. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that the work they had started would continue long after this day. As the meeting adjourned, employees mingled and exchanged ideas, their conversations buzzing with excitement. Maya found herself surrounded by colleagues eager to share their thoughts and suggestions. It was a vibrant community, a family united in their mission. Later that evening, as Maya walked out of the headquarters, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. She paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But she had also witnessed the incredible power of collective action and the impact of compassion. Maya smiled to herself, knowing that she had played a role in transforming not just an airline but also the lives of countless individuals. The fight for inclusivity and respect was ongoing, but she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. With a renewed sense of purpose, she stepped forward, ready to embrace the future, knowing that every step she took would contribute to the beautiful tapestry of change they were weaving together. The sky above was vast and filled with stars, each one a beacon of hope, reminding her that together, they could create a world where everyone belonged.